I was viewing on video before I went down. So, some alarming things. But meanwhile, the Japan Atomic Energy Agency is sponsoring right now a seminar on its new research and development center at Tokai.
Sure.
This is the site of many previous nuclear accidents, a nuclear reactor in that general area. And a lot of American companies, European companies in attendance, and it's quite foolish of them because the area is very radioactive there. Ibaraki Prefecture was bombarded with those nano balls of highly radioactive isotopes, including plutonium, all fused together in these tiny little, like pachinko balls, or what you call it, ball bearings. And so, not advisable for people, even if they work for the nuclear industry, to go to that area. Plus, this is a general area where 150 dolphins recently beached, many of them dying onshore, the others obviously dying offshore. I'm sure the whole pod went down. So, it's an area of continuing contamination. And here they're having a research and development center for decommissioning the reactors of Fukushima. And the question is, why didn't they do this 4 years ago? What took so long? So, obviously, more and more bad news coming in. Many of the workers have to be retired out because they get the limit on radiation. And so Japan's running out of workforce, so that's going to have to recruit foreigners somehow to come in and sacrifice their lives for this project. So we know the reactors.
They are literally asking them to come in and die. You're right.
Yeah, basically they're going to recruit people, and being foreigners, it won't really matter very much. It's not a lot of accountability. Just be written off. Oh, you can't have a precondition or something like that. So this is the problem we're facing, and then the internals of this reactor. Well, this is the smallest of the reactors, by the way, that melted down, and it's supposedly just a uranium reactor. And some bizarre things are happening, and there's some confusion over what the internal readings are. Tokyo Electric is trying to promote that.
They were saying 10 sieverts an hour. When the first robot went down, now they're saying...
Back when the robot went out, it was 48 sieverts an hour and rising. So we can't really trust. Obviously, 10 maybe on the outskirts, but, there's obviously some sort of upward venting coming through this thing. Something
is coming up. The Wall Street Journal says TEPCO to abandon the second robot inside the Fukushima reactor. So that's both robots have lasted just an hour or two or three, and they're dead. They don't want to pull them out. You know why? Because they've been bathed in up to 50 sieverts an hour of radioactivity, and to pull them out of there would be insane. You leave them in.
It'll be very difficult to pull them out because they'll basically lose another 3 or 4 robots trying to pull them out.
Yes.
So therefore... So that's a problem, and the more that they lose, the more junk is going to be in the path of any future these little mini tractors going in there. So basically, situation very bad, and the fact that the radiation is so unevenly distributed, and the fact that there is steam in it. Now the other thing is that, the TEPCO numbers are the internal temperature is something like 20. The highest one they said is 20 degrees centigrade, which is 68 Fahrenheit, which therefore would not account for steam being generated inside the reactor. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Sure.
You would have to have much hotter temperatures to boil water to reach the 100 degree.
Well, it's 212 degrees to boil water, I think.
Okay, and then so that is not happening in the reactor, obviously. Okay, or you have a higher temperature there. There's not much space between the bottom of the containment vessel and basically the floor of the reactor that we're talking about. Okay, the reactor, the chamber itself, where the nuclear reactions occur. So therefore, this means that the steam is arising from somewhere far below and is cooling off as it gets to this point inside the pressurized vessel. So therefore, all we can conclude is the corium is pretty far down, and it's moving through a lot of colder rock and water to break through. It's actually a form of fog, not a steam. It's not steam, it's fog. So this was another indication the corium is long ago broke through containment, is in the ground, and whatever that water vapor is inside is generating far below ground, and it's really radically cooled off, since the water was boiling. So that's another sign. I mean, these are just simple kitchen science deductions that we can make, right? And what's true in the kitchen is true in the reactor too, because the water behaves in the same way. The boiling point of water doesn't vary. So unless under extreme pressure, of course. So the other thing is glowing blue and green. So
weird colors: blue, green, yellow.
Yeah. So as I've argued, I think radioactive sulfur is one of the elements there, but there's probably many others. This meltdown was so severe, it just made everything radioactive, including the iron, the cobalt, the manganese inside the steel. And so from the earlier robot, we saw, I later saw some other scenes from there where the metal structure inside the support structure for the rod, you see is massively pitted, and some of these, holes inside the surface are quite big, and they're not all, they tend to be circular, but not all of them are circular, indicating what I said, in the last show, that the metal, not only expanded from heat, but it expanded from not molecular, but nuclear, expansion, that, the bombardment was so intense that the added protons and neutrons made the steel, the ferrous molecules, actually transform into other elements. And in that expansion, it just blew out whole pieces, like all throughout every beam, you see like hundreds of holes. So basically, the structure is not really steel anymore. I mean, iron, there may be a little bit of iron left.
I don't know what it is. It's been...
We don't know what it's composed of.
Well, it's been transfigured into something else.
Exactly. It's all been transfigured into something else, which does not have the structural strength of steel. So the thing, obviously, is doomed to come down with the recurrent earthquakes we have in the area. The thing does not have the strength of steel anymore, and it's sitting over a hollow space. If the temperatures, that 20-degree temperatures, in any indication with the presence of steam, it's sitting on top of hollow vents in the ground, and corium's far down below, which we predicted, like in the first year, right, in the first few months, we were saying this is what happened in the reactors. And I did interview one nuclear engineer, right, a member of the Japanese parliament, who said there's a great fear, that he had a great fear that the reactors will collapse into the ground below, okay? So I think this, he made that call.
When did he say that?
Well, I think I wrote you a story about, he's the only nuclear engineer in the parliament. I interviewed him. I sent you some of his comments. It was one of the early stories. And then he had this fear that he said these things are massively heavy. They're massively heavy, and if the ground underneath gets laced by meltdowns, the corium breaks through, that the ground is going to be unstable. And that in any case, there's just a lack of maintenance of the area. The water flows going through and all that. There's great underground instability, and he's afraid that the whole reactor structure will collapse into itself and go underground. He said at that point there'll be no way to get, to do any work on it. It would just be impossible to get in there, because it would just be one massive radioactive mess, and an enormous amount of radiation out of the ground. And corium, you got to remember in that first year, the corium was inside the reactor chamber, it was like something like 250 sieverts an hour levels of radiation. It's still down there somewhere, a couple hundred sieverts, 150 sieverts, down below the ground right now.
Correct.
But if you collapse everything and everything shatters, assuming the steel cannot hold, that it's in fact an amalgam of all kinds of elements.
It may well be.
It'll crack open, and we're going to see this 100 sieverts, just pouring out of the heat there and out of the so-called steam, out of the fog emitting from the place, which would be a major disaster. It'll be the end of most of northern Japan if that's the case. They'll be totally out of containment then. We're talking about, there has been levels of containment even underground, layers of ground. But at that point, if it does collapse, I'm afraid the situation is going to be very bad until it can be. Somehow they'll probably try to patch and cover, but that will take time, and I'm not sure who's going to do that job. So the solution.
I don't see how much longer we can continue to dodge this bullet. Something is going to give, and when it does,
they've got to start moving, and they've got to get some tunneling machines. They've got to bore deep. I think one engineer, I read some post somewhere about boreholes. Exactly it. But bigger than boreholes. We're talking about tunneling into the rock, not into the sedimentary rock, but not into that porous rock, but into the solid rock of the Abakuma Plateau, which is basically seabed rock. It's extremely hard. It's brittle, but I think it's sealable. You do a tunnel.
Isn't that? Can you go down to get it, or do you have to go back and up to get it?
It'll be better to do it at an angle, so that you can control it and have tunnels go down to it.
Sure.
So if radiation builds up, you can pump water down there. So basically, you would need a mega system of tunnels there as a permanent repository, with sort of going down at a diagonal, and then you would have access tunnels, going down vertically to it, so we can monitor and do whatever necessary. Pour boron in there, boric acid, whatever we need to do to contain the prevent the possibility of another explosion down there, or a fusion reaction.
Sure,
like that.
Sure.
My concern is about this, when that thing skyrocketed, how do you get from 10 to 48 sieverts, in a relatively short distance in the interior? It doesn't make sense, does it? I mean, it would seem that...
Well, I'm not a nuclear physicist,
but... 25, 30 sieverts,
Yeah.
You have these variations in radiation.
What's causing the surges?
Chambers.
Yeah, I don't get it. It seems a nuclear scientist, an honest one, should be able to come up with a guess, but I haven't seen any.
Yeah, and the thing suddenly went down, and I think what happened, the camera actually spotted some sort of discolorized flash. I assume, we've seen these sort of mini reactions, right? When reactor 3 was going down, we saw all these sort of blue light, white light, yellow light, sort of like they look like little fireworks, just bursting out just for a millisecond, just bursting out, which seem to be like the mini fusion reactions of tritium and heavy water fusing and then hitting, let's say, a hot particle of plutonium and just causing this. I mean, we're talking just a tiny amount in gas, okay? We're talking gas reactions in gas and gas plasma start bursting out. And I'm wondering if it's the gas plasma that's bubbling up, and that's what is causing the differential in radiation. You see what I'm saying?
I do?
It is like a bubble of gas that comes out, it's gasified nucleotides, all right, that bubbles up, and it's sort of like coming up like a bubble through the air inside the reactor, and that would account for how you get the difference between a 48 and reading and a 10 sievert reading. And then certainly if this thing hits the robot, possible flash occurrence, the electronics in the robot might be just sufficient just to trigger a reaction, just to spark a reaction. I'm not sure, but it is curious that they did cut out that last 10 seconds of the video. They censored it out because this is something they're very afraid of. There's going to be many more. There's new types of fusion reactions going on, and then the larger one will trigger another major nuclear explosion. The Earth will burst forward like a volcano, and they'll release just basically deadly nucleotides that will, basically go around the planet and kill everything in the northern hemisphere. Massive cloud of radioactive particles.
And this could happen. This could happen.
I think that's what they're afraid of. That is the end game. The thing that they're really afraid of, that whatever is out of control down there is making a plasma nuclear gas, gas of radioactive iron, and whatever took out the camera. Maybe that. But you follow my what I'm saying here.
Oh,
a bubble
sure.
Of gas coming up, okay, from down below the reactor. You know,
it could be moisture pushing this stuff up. We don't know.
Well, it's flowing through a column of fog. Basically, it's flowing through a column. So the fog tends to, the water tension in the fog tends to keep the gas together. It's coming up like a bubble. Okay, it's bubbling up from water through a fog, so the gas tends to hold together. But as soon as it hits some sort of electrical charge, or let's say a particle of plutonium, a small particle of plutonium uranium, it then has a fusion and fission reaction.
Mm-hmm.
A quick fusion and fission reaction occur in succession, and you get a mini blast. It's tiny, like a little firecracker. It's like, TNT. Yep. You can build a blockbuster bomb with the stuff, or you can make a tiny firecracker, or even a cap gun, a pistol, cap pistol.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, same thing in nucleotides. Although humans can't do it, our scientists can't do something like that. We have an environment here that can do that. Okay, it can handle it can make explosions with very, very small amounts of nucleated gas, which is very reactive. It's no longer a solid; it's a gas, but it's very reactive. It's something that we have yet to do in the lab. It's something we don't really understand too well. Okay.
All right, let's go.
We're still sitting on the edge of total catastrophe. Okay?
Well, of course we are, and it's going to get worse.
Yeah.
Let's go up to BC and find out what Dana Durnford has been up to.
Glad to hear from you.
Are you there, Dana?
Yeah, hi, Jeff. Thank you. Hi, Yoshi.
Hey,
welcome back.
Yeah, I just got in the port and getting ready. I fueled up before I gave it up for the day, and I'm ready to go down the coastline tomorrow. I'll start working my way down south. And so finally finished the north end, the northwest corner of Canada, and it's pretty bleak up here, folks. Anybody that's not up in the loop, we're looking at the species on the coastline of British Columbia, Canada, and we discovered that most of the species, not most of them, the majority of the species are actually missing, and we're confirmed it now. We've been on the ocean for 8 months, and it's definitive that the coastline has been totally wiped out, and just a handful of algae remain, and that we're down to less than 1% of 1% of any.
You've been out 8 months?
8 months, and been on the go straight 140 days without getting back home.
Good
and
God.
I expect another 40 days. And then, but I never, who would have thought that it would keep going outside of the fact that we couldn't even find pockets of life? And it has to be proven before you can have a debate. Everybody knows that. And so we've done it.
Yeah.
But, it's never me. It's everybody out there, people from all around the planet, and everybody that supported it and kept it alive, including particularly yourself, Jeff, and Yoshi, and it's those kind of people behind the operation and everybody donating, and then out there on the ocean that we actually got the data. So that coastline is destroyed. Out of 438 seiners that should be out there this year, there's only 38 now. And so I wonder what that was all about. I haven't got all the details on it. But it's a rather interesting thing that only 38 seiners will work the coastline this year. And so, that's literally the end of the fishery. Sardines have failed. The herring, obviously, now that's going to fail.
Well, didn't I read that they had called an end to sardine season in California already? Because there aren't any?
That's right. You couldn't find any. Shocking, because that's the basis of the food chain for the bigger fish and birds and animals and marine life itself. And, and so there you go, folks. We got that sad stuff, but now we have to really do something proper and think about the future. Like you guys were talking about, how do you decommission those reactors? And sending in the homeless is never
you don't How do you recondition or decommission or do anything with something that's destroyed? I don't even know what they're thinking about.
Like you guys were saying, 5 sievers, if anybody not familiar, will kill you. So 10 is definitely going to kill you in 20 minutes or something.
How about 50?
So that's why you won't see her. That's right. You won't see. That'll annihilate you in about 4 minutes.
Well, that's why they won't pull the robots out. I really believe that's part of it.
Yeah. That kind of radiation is never going to go away either. And
No.
Now we got to face up to what we're dealing with, because the dead Pacific Ocean, that stuff is going to spread to the other oceans, and the bird life is missing. Last year we seen the insects were missing, and they can't deny it much longer, and then obviously it's going to be too late. too late now. Even if you stop the reactors in Fukushima, you can't save the Pacific or much of anything else on this planet.
Correct.
That's because they lied about bananas, potato chips, and walking in sunshine for 70 years. That's the problem. See, a nuclear scientist can only be a lawyer. He can't be an actual scientist. He can only be a arm, or, another leg of the machine. He's got to get out and tell everybody, oh, it's like a banana, and it's like walking in sunshine, and it's like potato chips. He's not allowed to tell the truth. And so that's why nuclear has failed, because scientists were never allowed to address the truth. They were only allowed to pretend that there's something special and then propagate a lie out. And so they lost faith in themselves. They lost faith in what they were doing, obviously, when they had to go to that route. Mm-hmm. We'll come up to a commercial, I think, every...
No, we're going to go ahead and go through it. Go ahead. Keep talking.
And so that's the problem. And I was thinking about this heavily over the last several days. I got pounded up here in the northwest corner, just massive seas. Mm-hmm. And just to get out there every day and get that data, with the understanding that if we don't have the data, there's no, the people that are following this and are trying to change the world for the better, they need that data just like everybody else. They need to see it themselves and to gut up and go ahead and do the right thing. And we're seeing that in the media. There are scientists and academics now starting to rally and starting to speak out and starting to be vocal and starting to involve, what scientists should be. And it's something that they can't be themselves, so there has to be an outsider that stands up. Like Yoshi, imagine if he was still ready for the Japanese times, what kind of, power he could put behind his words that he has so many years practicing with such eloquence can only be because of his heart, and because he understood he had an opportunity, got the education. And so when a lot of people say that what can I do? You look at Jeff, you look at Yoshi, and you think about people like that, and that's what it takes, is you got to go ahead and do it yourself, and you've got people out there that are already laid the groundwork. You can see how it works, and you just work towards your goal, you'll get it. But if you don't start, you don't put one foot to the other, the trip will never start. And in my case, the trip may never end because, we keep finding so much devastation, we have no choice but to keep going until it was over with. And it's over when it's over, I guess. I've said many times, it'll be over in a few weeks or a month, and I come to the realization that I'm trying to pacify and satisfy people instead of trying to do the job that I got to do and worrying about other people. I don't do that no more, but that was an issue for me where I thought that way. Once I broke that train of thought, I can do a much better job, much more proficient. And I'm really just getting on my game now. I'm really just becoming... people don't understand the significance of what I'm saying, maybe, is that what's happening to the dead Pacific Ocean is not a joke. We never seen... Look, think about 3 Mile Island, folks. It lasted 5 days. Think about Chernobyl. It lasted 10 days. And it was equal to 400 Hiroshima bombs.
Yeah.
It hasn't stopped, and it'll never stop, right, Jeff?
No, never. No. Hundreds of years. Hundreds of years.
Yeah, they got to admit that. They got to come and deal with it. And they got to free up the scientists to be able to do the job. If you keep the scientists, like there's no nuclear scientist on the Arnie Gunderson in North America. The only nuclear scientist is allowed to talk about Fukushima. And everybody else seems like they got them locked away.
Can somebody answer me this? And I'm not putting him down. Arnie did some wonderful work in the beginning, and it was seemingly a case where he was speaking freely, openly, logically, pragmatically. He has all but vanished in the last 6 months. I don't see anything of him anymore talking. What did they go, subscription? Did they tell him to shut up? He's not around. I just don't run across him.
Well, Jeff, Arnie is a nuclear engineer, plant operator. He was just made, there were all kinds of scurrilous accusations made against him.
Oh, yeah.
Within his own profession. He was under assault. And the other thing is a nuclear engineer in some ways isn't prepared to answer some of the questions of what's going on. We're talking about, it's not a field that I'm strong in, but I did study chemistry and I did study some nuclear chemistry. Mm-hmm. And most engineers are not trained in those areas of understanding these reactions beyond sort of more like an engineer, in a very technical, static way. They're not taught to examine phenomena as they are and try to figure out, to work backward from your observation and go back over your science. So, in a certain sense, I can understand why nuclear engineers are left speechless by what's going on. This stuff is way beyond. It's not in the manual. It's not what they've been taught. It's not in their education. So I would give them some credit, some credit there, because it is beyond the imagination, I think, of 99% of the people in the industry.
I'm not trying to take any credit.
The Tokyo Electric Power is a total loss.
Yeah.
The science ministry is sampling in Japan. They're backed by Department of Energy, who are scratching their heads, So, it is very difficult from a scientific perspective to understand the complexity of what's going on and the enormity of it. No one's, like I said, this stuff has never been seen in the lab before.
No.
And, this is beyond, this is beyond anything that anyone knows right now. And when I suggest, possible, pathways of why this is happening, that is just based on very rough logical deduction, of these processes. They're rough schema. They're not like precisely detailed, and a scientist or engineer would have to be a lot more precise, okay? So I think that's where they're caught. They can't make these sort of rough sketches, and I think, so the science itself is very, very much curved. The methods of science curves the ability.
But seriously.
Let's say Dana's not sitting there just observing one species, okay, as a marine biologist would do for 20 years.
Thousands.
He's out there making that broad sketch of what's going on in the ocean. Marine biologists aren't trained to do that anymore. They're not, there are no Jacques Cousteaus anymore. That's from a former era, of a Renaissance science. Today, marine biologists will study a very narrow range of species, again, for 20 years before making even the vaguest kind of conclusions. There's a problem in this whole division of science we call the taxonomy of science. It's the over-specialization of science, which prevents us from knowing things that are slapping us in the face.
I'm not saying anything negative about Arnie. I'm just saying he's no longer present. Not like he was.
Exactly. Yeah. So this is, I regret that there's fewer and fewer people, but it's understandable if they do feel at a loss. They feel they don't know what they might be talking about and don't really want to talk if they don't know. So it's very tough. It's a very tough situation. So, I don't know if he's under pressure, but I can also say there's many, many scientists are befuddled right now. They don't know even where to begin.
I concur.
I'm not making excuses for them. This is a mega, monstrous, complicated event that's beyond anything we've seen in our lifetime. And maybe it's the beginning of the science.
What we got to do is treat it like a Hollywood movie where we get all the greatest minds together and we come up with a solution and a way forward. I had a way forward, and what I would do is I take all the Xbox gamers or PlayStation gamers, top-notch gamers, and you would hook up cameras, high-powered cameras, can see for miles and miles. We got lots of that for surveillance, and we would hook them up all around Fukushima Prefecture, and these people can operate liquid, hydraulic-driven robots that are backed by long hoses, 2 miles of hoses, 3 miles of hoses, and go in and dig up the whole site, because when the site exploded, it put rods, and the rods had all these pellets in it, and each rod is 18 pounds and full of pellets, and so they're all over the site. They need to dig up 3, 4, 5 feet of that topsoil. But what they done was they went in and cemented everything and paved over everything, so that has to be taken apart, and they have to get that out of the ground, because the whole ground is X-rays and neutrons and splitting atoms, and every time it rains, and that site is liquefaction where the water is coming up from the mountain, from the ocean itself. It's very unstable to spraying water on it all the time. And the reason they have to do that is because they got all these rods underneath all that site and pellets and that. And these are extraordinary. A pound of it will kill everybody in a stadium in a couple of hours, but it kill everybody in a bar in about 20 minutes. And you can do that till the end of time. So they have to come out. We've got to get them out. And the solution is not just to bury them over and pretend they don't exist and pretend it didn't happen, because we have the documentation of all the explosions, and we know that the rods were expelled out of the site far, far away, and that's the solution, is we have to start cleaning it up.
It went miles away, nanoparticulates, it went everywhere.
Right, and they have to dig up 6 feet of topsoil for a couple of miles around that site, and that's a start. That's a way forward, and then the only thing you're left with now is the coriums themselves, the melter reactors and the buildings and the Fukushima Prefecture. but they have to start off somewhere, and a lot of it is migrated a lot deeper than that, certainly, but that is a huge step forward, because that is one of the biggest problems, is they're not even going to try to deal with that, and this stuff is supposed to be in a sarcophagus till the end of time, and so it's not, and that's the problem with it, is it's all over the country in every sense of the word. Japan, we know 60,000 square miles of it is highly polluted. We got the numbers from the first year. And so that country is just devastated in another 5 or 6 years. According to the dog studies and the animal studies on radiation, they were cruel studies. We can see what's happening now is going to escalate in the human population because they're further up the food chain.
Sure.
But normally it would take 10 or 15 years for it to show up. This stuff is showing up right away. It's because you were talking about earlier, the sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs that are created when they spray salt water in the reactor. It's a whole different phenomenon. I worked out the numbers, and it works out about 1,400 Hiroshima bombs worth of radiation every day.
Every day?
That's not counting the spent fuel pools, because they melt it down. They're like a corium that goes down. That works out because of what Hiroshima was equated to 400, or Chernobyl was 400 Hiroshima bombs just over 10 days. Mm-hmm. And Fukushima, the reactors are 5 million pounds in each of those 3 melted reactors. And so that's a much bigger inventory by far than the buildings themselves are 3 times the size. And of course, Chernobyl was 1/3 meltdown, and at 30%, the size is, right, and then it stopped after 10 days, but you couldn't eat the sheep or drink the milk in in Scotland and Ireland and Britain for the next 20, 25 years.
Covered most of Europe.
Right. And so that stopped after 10 days. Imagine if Chernobyl, like we said before, never stopped, then we probably wouldn't have the problem we got with Fukushima because we wouldn't have got rid of it. It would have been so devastating, would have got rid of us, no doubt, too, at the same time. And, once again, it's time for scientists and academics to make a stand because their future, they got no pensions. They got no future ahead of them.
No.
In the next 5 or 6 years, is all going to be just totally gone.
I have a
question. They need to come together and speak out. Go ahead, Jeff.
What if there was some kind of a nuclear bomb that they could construct and drop on Fukushima? It would penetrate like a bunker buster deep enough and somehow vaporize or otherwise transmute most of the isotopes into something that would be manageable or just gone. Somebody suggested that in the beginning, that they nuke it to stop this. So we have one. We'd have one shot to deal with, and we could handle that. But this chronic slow death, we can't.
Well, the problem with that is a nuclear bomb could take some of the fissile material and transmute it with neutron bombardment and with basically proton bombardment into neutron and proton into, let's say, non-fissile elements, okay? But the problem is it would also transform a lot of that material into even more radioactive elements. So you're just playing dice with the thing. And I think that is the problem. And also you have the risk of spread. It'd be
what if
very
we had,
difficult
what if,
capture that underground. And the problem is, again, the site is very close to the sea. So if you breach the seawall with that, it would.
Oh, you would. You absolutely would.
So I think there's too much risk entailed. That's why I go with the tunneling idea, which there would be a lot more control, and we could still, transfer that to a large area, much larger than the plant. These tunnels can be vast, and basically hold it in dilution in their controlled environment. We have to exercise a lot of control. The stuff, any kind of wild, fast solution bear a lot of risk, terrible negative consequences. And I don't think anyone will want to bear that risk if the thing just blew out into the sea. It would be like, it would be instant.
Well, it would have to blow out into the sea because it's sitting on fill dirt. It would go right out in the ocean.
Exactly. And that's the problem with that theory. Whoever thought of it thought that the reactors were sitting on hard rock, which it's not. They didn't realize it's sitting on gravel. They hollowed out all the rock, which we found out on site. We had to go be there on site this last summer to find that out, that the thing is sitting on a hollow space. Okay, so it's a good thing they didn't go through with that. So there are no quick solutions. The problem is the tritium coming out, and I think that's a problem, the tritium in the water, because there's no way we can filter that out. And the word I like that Dana uses, the word of escalation. Things aren't getting better. Escalation is occurring. We're getting more and more material building up, and we're seeing more and more complicated radionucleotides coming up, and in the heavy water, the tritium coming out. So there is a massive escalation month by month, year by year, and it points to that if it builds up to a danger point, it'll be too late to evacuate the western coast of Canada and the U.S. So there has to be at least now contingency plans made to how we're going to move those, I don't know how many million people out there, there's 40, 50 million people, how to move them, where to move them, and then who bears the financial responsibility for all the property losses and all the health problems that are going to arise. Who pays for it when we have governments, the federal government, the Canadian government, which is still committed to nuclear power, mining uranium, and all that? You see what I'm saying? That you can sue them, but they would go bankrupt.
Nobody wins.
The trillions of dollars it cost it would take to evacuate the entire West Coast to the Rockies, minimum to the Rockies, and a second contingency plan to, move them as far as Appalachia, okay? So basically, we've abandoned most of North America. Where would all those people go? How do we bear the cost? And who bears the cost of that? Obviously, the federal government should do it because it's been the main proponent of nuclear power, and certainly all the major corporations, GE, the corporation's easy. They can just declare bankruptcy, right? But what will the Canadian federal government, the U.S. federal government do if we have to, implement a contingency plan, $1 trillion plan to move out, let's say the majority of the American and Canadian population to very, very small areas of what's left habitable in North America?
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, I mean, they're cowards. I mean, let's face it. If Obama had any guts, he would step forward and tell the truth of what is happening, what's got to be done, how we've got to at least begin to prepare for the worst case scenario. Not without alarming people, just say, this is a national crisis, this is a civil defense crisis. It's the largest crisis America has ever faced, okay? It's the largest crisis in the entire history of North America. And we're going back to, since the Ice Age, since before the Ice Age, okay? That's how big this thing is. Who's got the guts to come out and say that? Does any presidential candidate dare speak? Yeah.
Hey, Yoshi, they actually got the plans in 1961, 1965, 1970 to evacuate cities in case the Ruskies attacked them. Mm-hmm. So they kind of got a plan, but they're basically just going to move them out of the city and then think about that later. But look, they evacuated the Chechnya River, folks, in Russia, 7,500 communities along that river permanently, 9,000 square miles. And so the precedent has already been set. And that is, what you're saying, Yoshi, is 100% correct. You do have to evacuate North America, the coastline, and you do have to go several hundred miles minimum inland. That's the minimum. And by rights, you should be on the other side of the Rockies from the Pacific Ocean, because that's the minimum you should do. And like Canada, on the East Coast, Ontario has 25 nuclear reactors, and the main water runs right past that. And so you can only evacuate basically the central Canada, but I don't know about the Americans, they might have to consider once again employing everybody to go to work at that. That's the new industry, is moving everybody out of the bloody country and having war crimes tribunals and everything else at the same time, much like they've done for Rwanda, where they had so many criminals. That's what we're looking at right now in the nuclear industry. They're all criminals. I see Goddard's journal is being picked up by James Colbert is recommending Goddard's journals now, and that's really confusing because Goddard's journal is all potassium-40, and so I don't know what's going on there, but we can't count on all the people that we normally count on to get this right because it's very confusing. So I get where people are confusing, and where even great minds are coming out and pointing you at potassium-40. Then the alternative movement out there needs people like yourself, Jeff, and Yoshi, more so than ever. And I know that's probably a bit of a shock to everybody, but we got to learn to disregard people that talk about potassium 40 or bananas or walking in sunshine or dental x-rays. You got to learn to call these people out. You got to learn to make a stand. You can't give them any freedom. You got to take that freedom away from them to say that. And you got to get in their faces, basically call up whoever published it, and you got to write them immediately. You got to not just the comment section, but actually write the editors and write the newspaper itself and make a big stink about it and force them not to talk about that no more. And over a couple of months of hammering them, you could beat them down. But that won't happen unless people actually start doing it. And that's something everybody can do is say, hey, you shouldn't talk about bananas when you're talking about nuclear reactors because they truly got nothing to do with
I
each
know,
other.
but the average person can't even explain the banana argument.
Right.
Huh.
Right, and so people got to get educated, and how are you going to do
that? Sadly, war crimes trials happen after the event. You know, that's not going to be very helpful for all the people who are right now being victimized, whose health is being threatened, whose livelihood is going down, whose homes are being essentially made unlivable. So we do need something. You know, I think of George Bush and Shinzo Abe transferring secretly American warhead plutonium to Japan aboard Israeli ships, okay? With Israeli-American people from GE working on basically nuclear weapons site in the Fukushima zone, you know, so, which contributed to this incredible amount of very high-strength plutonium, you know, that we're seeing come out, 241. I mean, you know, we're seeing some incredible things come out. The evidence is there. You know, the science.
It's not that many people, is it, Yoshi?
Pardon?
It's not that many people in the nuclear industry. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, anyway, I'm saying, this would definitely be an act of justice, but if we wait, 6, 7 years, I'm not sure there's going to be many of us left to press charges against anybody. We're in the midst of the disaster where war crime trials should have happened years ago. But it's interesting, this is the 70th anniversary of the defeat of Germany, Japan, which led to the Nuremberg and Tokyo war crime trials. Very interesting.
That's why we love you, Yoshi.
People will pontificate. They're not going to talk about the global war crime now being committed by the nuclear industry and the politicians who promote it. Okay?
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
Good point. You're good point. We do need a war crime. This is a war crime. You know, nuclear energy is about war, and this is clearly a war crime against the global public, against everybody on this planet, and every life form. It's an ecocide and genocide. Yeah,
like you guys been saying for 4 years.
It's only beginning, but it's going to end in a total genocide and ecocide. And you've seen the ecocide where you are. It's going to spread worldwide. Yeah.
Shocking. It's shocking. It's devastating.
Yeah.
It's horrific every day. It's truly horrific each day to go out there. And I understand that I have to get it done no matter what. It has to be done.
Well, we appreciate it. One thing people should understand is when Dana says being tossed around by high seas, this is beyond the imagination of all of us landlubbers, or even people who've done a little bit of sailing. You have I cannot comprehend the size and strength of the waves that have been hitting you. And it's
crazy. It's just, who would have known, that it's only because of what we're doing that I'm willing to go up against it. And it's only because it's real and we can't deny it. And it's only because if we don't do it, they will continue to deny it and have an ability. And if we do it, then they don't have that ability. We take that away from them.
Correct.
And so that's what we're trying to do, is just our little part. And once again, I'll let everybody go.
Our listeners just got to realize Dana and his friends are risking their lives every second they're out there. And
there are no friends anymore. It's just Dana, Yoshi. It's just him.
This is incredible ordeal. We look at the stuff on Discovery Channel, crab fishermen and all that. This is the conditions he's facing, and by no means on a strong little steel trawler, So I hope everyone appreciates the effort that he's making here. Really understands that this is life-threatening. This is really sacrificial work that's being done, and I hope people take it seriously. We got to act, not just listen. People got to figure out how they're going to act and respond with the same, or at least approaching that level of courage that Dana is showing. He's showing us, the rest of us, how to be brave, okay? And we've got the rest of us
all I want
a little bit braver than us.
All I want for them is to become half as articulated as you or Jeff, Yoshi. that'll be enough, because that's all people need is become articulate. And that's what I'm saying. You can listen to one of these shows, and I guarantee you will learn, and you will learn fast, and you will learn properly, and you will have a narrative that works when you're trying to have a conversation. It's not a debate, it's a conversation. And because if you treat it as a debate, it's us against them. But if you treat it as a conversation, it's open to both sides, and you can have a debate when you're both up to speed. And so I'm going to let everybody go. It's been, you wouldn't believe what kind of day this has been.
Oh, go get some rest.
At the very end of the day, I was pinned up on a beach and took a big wave trying to get off the beach. And it was just coming back, I was beaten up, washing machine. I finally got in. It was just hellish.
Yeah.
Okay, folks, hugs for everybody. Take care, Jeff and Yoshi.
All right, rest well. Get some sleep. Thank you.
Good luck. Happy sailing. I hope it calms down a bit out there. Happy sailing.
Yeah, okay, I'm going to run tomorrow, so 24-hour turnaround. Take care, folks.
Yeah.
Okay. Good night, Dana.
Yeah, well, what he says about being pounded on a beach,
I
don't know how many people have understood what it means. Being trapped on the beach with sort of like a cliff behind you, gigantic waves rising and breaking and coming up with a tide. I don't know how many people recognize the terror of that, especially if you got your equipment down there and all that. You can't just try to clamber up a cliff. Just what he's describing so calmly, actually, is just terrifying. Is the pure force of nature. I
don't know. Honestly, I don't know how he's made it. It's that hard. It's
tremendous amount of bravery. And I think not a little bit of faith too, they say no man's an atheist in a foxhole. This man doesn't even have a foxhole. He's out there in the open with radiation, knowing full well that Fukushima, radioactive garbage is right there in the air he breathes, okay, and the water that